Monday, degenerates. What's going on, gamblers? How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. And that's right, we are live. I think you can see the little thing up in the corner. Actually, that's probably just for me. You guys can't see that. I'm pointing at nothing. We're live. We're back on the show. It's not pre-recorded. The wait is over. I know it's only Monday and we're all foaming at the mouth right now, but we've got fights this week. We're talking about some MMA action and I cannot wait to get back into it with you all. I am your host, as always, Clint, and I'm here to walk you through UFC Vegas 84. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I hope everybody was safe over the holidays. We had Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff, and now we're back at it. Everybody's refreshed. We got a break. Half of us, myself included, probably have thinner pockets because I tried to bet a bunch of football without MMA. Let's not get into it. So we're gonna be having some fun here, and just real quickly, this is the first actual episode of the Die Hard MMA podcast for 2024. And you know what that means is we got a fresh slate. We get to start our year off clean. Now, I want to recap for those of you who may be new to the podcast, who maybe aren't familiar with me and what I do here. We had the worst year in podcast history, not last year, but the year before. Dropped 70 units, did it in front of everybody. Last year, we are coming off of our best year ever, rebounded in a huge way, plus 88 units last year. So it's been swinging madness over here. What I do on this show is I bring on people who are much smarter than me. I bring on people who are much better gamblers than me, and I am your friendly neighborhood degenerate. We are going to give you absolutely every single piece of information that we can about these bets and these fights, and you can use that information to make the bets as you see fit. Just know, if you're tailing me, we're probably going to swing from the rafters. I have a 4-year track record on this podcast long term. I am profitable, but we hit big time rough patches from time to time. It happens. I just want you to be aware of all of that going in if this is your first time watching. But like I said, my goal is to put on an entertaining show for you. I am open, honest, transparent with my bets and my action. So if you do want to know what I'm doing, I post absolutely everything publicly. And then I bring people on the show who are much better at this than I am, who are much smarter, much more analytical, have better driven numbers, but not a damn one of them is more handsome than me. That's right. We got to draw the line somewhere. So what we're going to do is shout out the chat. We've already got about 30 live viewers, everybody. Do me a favor. Hit the like button. We got to wake the algorithm up. We've been gone for a couple weeks. YouTube is not used to us being back and talking about fights. We got to let them know. My guy Mushroom MMA in the house saying 5 more sleeps, and he posted at 10:46 a.m. Our guy Mushroom was rearing and ready to go bright and early this morning. You love to see it. See Dell in the house. I'm back. Haven't watched the live show since November. Let's go, baby. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is Pub Sports Radio. If you want to jump in the chat and talk about these fights with us, consider maybe supporting the show, becoming a member, and then you can jump in here and chat with us. For the first week of the pod, I've got a very special guest for you today. We have none other than Twitter's favorite, Mike's MMA Picks, joining us to talk about the fights. Mike, how you doing today?
What's happening, Clint? Oh my goodness gracious. It feels so good to be back. Oh, how long has it been? It feels like an eternity, right?
Absolutely. 4 weeks, right? And it feels like it's been years.
Yeah. We got a great card to break down, 12 fights and no ladies fights.
That's right.
Interesting.
We got a couple good ones next week, though. They'll make up for it.
Yes. At Magomed, Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, main event, 5 rounds. Will we need them? I don't think so, but we'll find out in just a few days. Can't wait.
I can't wait. And as some of you may know, Mike is one of the heaviest hitters when it comes to supporting Mr. Magomed Ankalaev. So I absolutely had to get him on for this week. So we had some takes on that main event. You all know I'm kind of a hater. So it should be fun when we get to that final fight of the night. Good stuff. Now, Mike, real quick, I hit you with a curveball coming right out the gates here. Did you by chance place any futures bets going into this year? Do you have any long-term action in the UFC?
Man, no, I'll be honest. No, I have not, but I've seen the numbers on some of these future props, and it has me thinking that maybe I should be pulling the trigger on a few of these fighters, because I saw you got in on was it Benoit Saint Denis, and it looks like he has a path to the title.
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah. Well, for those of you listening, I did do a full show last week. The episode we dropped was a futures show. So if you want to watch that, make sure you take a look at it. I'll try to copy the link into the description of this one down below. So if you need something else to listen to throughout the week, I do for the pod, since again, everybody's going to be piling back on. If you didn't watch the off-season stuff, you probably don't know. My futures action, Mike, going into 2024 is as follows. I have taken a stance on Umar Nurmagomedov to be the champion at 8-1. I have a full unit on that. That number has since dropped. The only place it was available was BetOnline. I tried to point everybody there as quickly as possible. It's all the way down to 3-1 or plus 275 basically everywhere. Last year, I told everybody I took the shot on Umar at 50-1. He got injured late in the year. It looked like he was headed for maybe title contention. The plan was always to come back bigger and harder on him this year. Bookies are wise to it. They're not giving us any type of a good number on it. And that 8-1 was the only spot at BetOnline where you could get that number. Everybody knows what's coming. Umar for the crown, baby. So I'm hoping that one comes through strong for me. Next, I've got Movsar Evloev to be the flyweight champion at 20-1. That's just a quarter unit, little sprinkle shot, nothing crazy. Make sure you shop around, folks, because you can find him still at like 18-1-ish in that ballpark. But then other books have him as low as 5 and 6-1, I believe. I saw him 8-1 out there. So there's a big variety of numbers depending on where you're shopping for these futures. My thought process, Mike, behind that one is simply, if we have Topuria taking the crown, if he manages to dethrone the GOAT when he faces Volkanovski, there's some history between Movsar Evloev and Topuria. I think that's probably the fight they make next. So I'm not necessarily like planting my flag like this guy's taking the title, but at 20-1, if we get that matchup by the end of the year, hey, I only got to get through one fight and have a good number to do it. So fingers crossed. Then I've got Manel Kape, who fights this weekend. We'll talk about him in a little bit. Spoiler alert, I probably think he wins. 14-1 for a half unit for him to be champion of the flyweight division by the end of the year. And then I have Mayra Bueno Silva to be the women's bantamweight champion. She was only down at plus 350. I did put 2 units on that one. That's my biggest futures bet of the year for her to be champion. She's just got to get by Rocky. I think she wins that fight. And then she probably faces Juliana Pena. I think she wins that fight. So basically getting, 350 win. She could be minus 110 to minus 250 in her next fight. So I just think it's a better price tag on basically the rest of the year. We'll see what happens. And finally, I'm glad you brought it up, Mike. Benoit Saint Denis. This is the one that, folks, I hope you listened to the show. Those of you who are listening to this episode didn't listen to the Futures show. You missed out. It's gone. I put it out there on Twitter. I put it out there on Instagram. I hope you jumped in. We got BSD at 30-1. Now, it's just a small little sprinkle. At the time, we thought there's a bit of a path for our guy to maybe get to the title, but obviously he's outside the top 10. Nothing crazy. We wake up to a fight matchup with Dustin freaking Poirier. I could not ask for a better situation, Mike. This number has gone from 30-1 to plus 550 at DraftKings overnight. Like the swing of this number. You can shop around. You can still find, I think I saw 18-1 on Benoit Saint Denis out there at some books. So you can still find a little bit more squeeze on that number than DraftKings has. But I am loving this position because if the champ does defend his title, International Fight Week-ish probably, against either Charles Oliveira or Arman Tsarukyan, that leaves a window for us to have an end-of-year title fight where he will fight a second time. And if Benoit Saint Denis gets another big finish over a guy like Dustin Poirier, I would think he's probably next in line for that crack. So I'm very excited now about what was just a little sprinkly dart throw. Seems like a very legitimate play to me now at this point.
Excellent. Some may refer to that as value. significant value that you're able to lock in there. So let's wish the best for Benoit Saint Denis in his future endeavors. Hopefully he can get through Poirier unscathed and no injuries. Let's go and let's see what happens. I think he has a solid chance.
I like it. I'm very, very excited. I've been a Benoit Saint Denis guy since the beginning, so I'm very excited to watch the rocket ship that he's been on go flying through the stratosphere here. Big challenge, but I think he's got what it takes, and at 30-1, I think I've got the right number for him to see it through. So fingers crossed. But you know what? That's enough about all the good futures and all that stuff. Mike, you've sacrificed your time out of your day to come talk fights with us. So why don't we get into UFC Vegas 84? First fight of the evening, everybody. We've got Felipe Bunes taking on Joshua Van. And Mike, I really feel like they're setting us up with a curtain jerker. The UFC likes to get started in style. More often than not, we see unders on these opening fights. We see big hot prospects on these opening fights. And I think that's exactly what this is, right? Josh Van stumbled onto the scene last year and captured everybody's hearts immediately. He is pure fireworks. 22 years old, 9-1 back-to-back wins in the organization. I had a little bit of concern with him when he won a little bit of a hairy split over Zhalgas Zhumagulov, and then he turns around against Kevin Boras and beat the brakes off of him. Now, during that fight, he did get tested. He got chin checked. He got wobbled. He got a little over aggressive. He showed he's got some heart. He punched his way back into that fight and he got the win. That's the kind of performance you want to see from a kid that's 22. That's the kind of fight that's going to help him grow and, facing that adversity, that first bit of adversity these young fighters face. We see time and time again that's kind of the testing ground, right? Do they collapse under that, have to go back to the drawing board? Do they face it and then get better? It seems like Van is kind of the new hotness at this point, and I kind of feel like the UFC is putting him in a position here to succeed. Felipe Bunes, he was originally scheduled, to face Zhalgas Zhumagulov himself. That fight got canceled. He trains with the Pitbull Bros. And I'll be honest with you, Mike, I kind of need your help here on this one because I'm confused. I don't get it. When I broke down his fight with Zhalgas, I said kind of the same thing. I simply don't understand the Bunes experience here. He's 34 years old, so he's not a prospect. And it's not like they're bringing in CM Punk. This is not some guy who's got some stellar record that's got fame and fortune from somewhere else that's going to do numbers. He's not going to be a shoe-in to be a UFC champion like Lesnar was. He's 13-6 at 34. He went on a 3-fight losing streak and has since gone on a 3-1 winning streak. But those 3 wins have all come over cans. And the one loss is against Jussier Formiga, a guy who has been cut by the UFC. That's the guy he lost to, was somebody the UFC said, yeah, you're not cutting it at this stage of your life anymore, Jussier. Thank you, but no thank you. I don't get it. I don't know why he's here. I don't know why he got signed. He's not fun. He's not exciting. I take that back. He's fun. He'll get in there and he'll fight. He'll punch with people. But simply being a feeder who didn't come from Dana White's Contender Series, I kind of think that's all he is. Maybe I'm being disrespectful, but I feel like this is a Van smash spot, man. Mike, what do you make of this first fight of the night?
Well, Bunes was supposed to take on Dennis Bondar, right? So that was a spot where that was potentially a winnable fight right there. And in swoops Josh Van. And Van is, I'll be honest, I watch him fight. He's a pressure heavy volume boxer, and he doesn't really care about what's coming back at him. He doesn't have the fight of Holloway, but he in a way fights like Holloway in that he is going to march forward. He goes to the body, comes up top. And you saw in his last fight, he almost got finished a few times. There was a flying knee up the middle that Borjas threw that if that lands on most flyweights, you're going out. And he came out the other side victorious. And I think that's also due to the young man's chutzpah that he's only 22 years of age and he is spry. He hasn't faced much adversity inside of the octagon. Granted, he did get through Zhalmagulov. And in this spot, you look at Bunes and he's probably wondering what the hell happened here. I was supposed to fight Dennis Bondar. I was supposed to rack up an easy victory, and in comes this little Terminator. And that's really what he is. The only issue is it's one of those situations where if you don't get at Van early. He's improving at such a fast clip that the holes that we saw in previous fights might not be there in the future. And fight IQ was pretty high in the last matchup, how he took the fight to the mat after getting rocked. I was impressed by that. So, I mean, I'm going to be pulling for Van here. I have no action on the fight just simply because the 22-year-old striker who's willing to throw caution to the wind, I'm a little suspect there. But you're right. You're right. On the other side of the fight, Bunes, why is he here, right? He's here to give Dennis Bondar a competitive fight after what we saw. Bondar took one of the most brutal knockouts we've seen in the history of the sport last time out, right? So I'll be picking Van here, and I think that violence might be the answer here.
I'm with you there. I think we've seen what happens when he faces somebody UFC caliber, and I think Van is, if anything, UFC caliber. So I'm kind of thinking Van, and I'm kind of thinking Van by finish. I've got 2 bets so far on this card, Mike. Obviously, we'll touch on those when we get to them. But Van is in that I know parlay is kind of a bad word these days, but sometimes in MMA, it's a pretty smooth way to get the right price tag. Minus 225-ish, depending on where you're shopping out there for Joshua Van. I think he's the right side, and I do think he probably qualifies as parlay material. You hope you don't find the parlay buster and play that guy, but I would be considering parlaying up Josh Van. And I'm having a bit of a weird thought on this one, Mike. We touched on the lack of women's MMA action this week, but next week there are some decent women's MMA fights. And I noticed that if you tie Joshua Van to none other than, let me see, where'd she go here? Miss Jazz Judavicius, that comes out to like a minus 115 price tag. And I know that might sound a little nutso. You guys know I hate on Jazz basically every time I break down her fights. That's the one that jumps off the page at me next week, is she has just a perfect, ideal matchup. And getting a near even money price tag for those 2 fighters for the just win parlay. If you can manage to sit on those funds for a week, I think that's a casher. I may end up playing that one myself.
At home up north also.
Exactly. Very few Canadian prospects at the moment in the UFC. I kind of feel like they're trying to get a couple people rolling here for the home squad, because Canada hasn't been so hot lately. All right, moving right along, everybody. We've already got 68 live viewers. Thank you all so much for joining us. My guy Mike's MMA Picks hanging out here with us. This is Pub Sports Radio. Hit the like button for me, and let's talk some more fights. Next up, we got Tom Nolan taking on Nikolas Motta in a fight that I'm having a real hard time with, Mike. So Tom Nolan is just the perfect archetype for my Dana White's Contender Series fade. Now, when COVID was at its height, I don't know if I get canceled on YouTube these days for saying COVID. I hope not. I might have just discontinued our ability to profit on this this live stream. So when COVID was rampant, I found a gorgeous angle, Mike, and it was the Dana White Contender Series fade. These fighters were on their own show. It's their own little thing. Nobody's in the UFC yet. They're fighting other people. It's essentially an extra regional fight for them to get into the UFC. And you just saw time and time again, when somebody had an exciting finish, a big knockout, a quick sub, they were overvalued by everybody, because we saw them against non-UFC caliber competition, and they flash a moment of brilliance, and then they jump into the middle of the division. Every time. It never failed. They didn't start at the bottom in the UFC. They would come in midway through, and people just expected them to flourish. The Sean O'Malley's of the world are few and far between. It was hard for them, and we found profit blindly fading these big favorites that came over from Dana White's Contender Series. Now, last year, I talked about the angle, and I said, guys, we are no longer going to blindly play this. We're going to pump the brakes on the angle, because the UFC also figured out that all their prospects from Dana White's Contender Series were losing immediately. And so they started matchmaking them a little bit softer. So I am mentioning the angle because it's been a thing we've talked about for 2 years, and it applies in this fight. But I'm not necessarily going to attack with it. Similarly to last year, I think it's going to be a a piece, a tool that we can kind of like add to the puzzle. If it fits, if it makes sense, if we already like a side, maybe it pushes us over the edge to making a play. But it's not one that I'm going to blindly be betting this year, folks, just so you know. So what we've got is Tom Nolan, 6-0. Not a lot of run on these tires. Very fresh, very young. Only 6 professional MMA fights. Tall, lanky. He likes to flash that Muay Thai knee up the middle. He likes to attack the body. He's got good finishing instincts. Nasty ground and pound. He's fast. I like this guy. Seems like he's got some pop on his punches too. So he's going to have a 3-inch height advantage. I'm sorry, a 4-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage over Nikolas Motta. Now, Motta is somebody who is also from Dana White's Contender Series once upon a time, and he has not fared so well in the UFC so far. He's having a bit of a rough run, and his last fight was just awful. Like, I had Trey Ogden, a very strong stance on Trey Ogden in my pocket, and I feel robbed. Absolutely robbed. Ogden was wrongfully a dog to Motta, beat the brakes off of him, and was this close to not only winning the fight, but finishing it. And it's an early stoppage. It's an accidental stoppage. The referee gets in there and thought that he was unconscious. So I understand why they made it a no contest. That's probably fair to Motta, but it hurts for me. It hurts for my pocket. I really wanted to cash that ticket, and I'm right without the gambling reward, and that makes it even worse. But what we're seeing is Motta just doesn't seem to be cutting it, right? He's a bit of a pocket brawler. He's training at Extreme Couture. Good gym based on his style. Seems like they're pretty solid at handling fighters. You know, Chris Curtis, guys that have a very similar style of offense to Nikolas Motta. I think he's in a good spot. But his only win in the UFC is Cameron Van Camp, who is extremely chinny. A guy who I do not think is UFC caliber whatsoever. So we've got old versus new. And the only thing that has me kind of sketched out on this fight is the number, because I absolutely think Nolan looks like he's probably the goods, but at minus 350, minus 400, that's an insane price tag coming in here against somebody who has almost as many professional losses as you do fights. 13, 5, and 1. I mean, you're tripling up the experience of Tom Nolan. And in MMA, sometimes that's enough to get over the hump. So I can't lay the wood here, man. I know people hate this, especially on YouTube. I'm going to pick Tom Nolan to win. I'm not touching this guy from a betting perspective. I do think he can get to the chin of Motta. It seems like Motta's chin is having a hard time holding up these days. He has a hard time with the range. That's another thing Tom Nolan's going to have going for him here. So I will pick Tom Nolan. I do think he probably knocks Motta out, but it also would not shock me whatsoever if Nolan made that one mistake and Motta was able to roll, close the distance, get in the pocket, hurt him with a liver shot, you know, something vet savvy to show the kid that maybe he's got a thing or two to learn before he's ready for this level.
Yeah, and you kick things off making a great point that Tuesday Night Contender Series amplifies recency bias. It really does. And I have to say that when you watch Motta fight, that Ogden performance, everybody go back and watch the Manny Torres elbow, how that landed on Nikolas Motta, and that really changed. That was a life-changing strike. Really, it was. And I was on Motta against Ogden. I was ready to, I was like, all right, I lost. This is an L. And then the referee made a bonehead decision, and here we are. The thing is, I've got to be honest, Clint, when you watch Motta fight, there are some, I see the visuals of a potentially broken fighter. The way he was having so much trouble with the jab of Trey Ogden. Dan Levy mentioned that Ogden was looking like Muhammad Ali out there throwing the jab out. So this is a situation where you have Nolan, who has been finished on the regional scene as an amateur. That's a cause for concern. I'm not totally sold on Nolan here, but I go to try to play an under number, and I see the under 1.5 is in the minus 200s or so. I'm not liking that. So you have to think of some creative ways of attacking this fight. If you believe that, well, here's the thing. You have Motta is dangerous. And if he commits to his strikes, and if he believes in himself and he isn't shell-shocked like he was against Trey Ogden, then he can give himself a chance to win the fight. We watched, how many times have we seen fighters coming off of a loss where they just are shell-shocked and they will not fight to win? We saw it with Chris Gutierrez against Song Yadong, and there have been many, many others. But here, I think that Nolan, who I consider a Dan Hooker light, in the way he does throw that knee up the middle, and he's got those long strikes, I think that he has the potential to put Motta's lights out, but I wouldn't be surprised one bit to see Motta land a strike that ends up folding Nolan like an accordion, to be honest. So I think that violence is probably right, but man, you look at what fight doesn't go the distance. I saw minus 1,400 at betonline.ag. So that is not a number I'm willing to play, but man, if there's, I don't see this one going the distance. I'll say that. If you did want to parlay something, it might be the under 2.5 if you can get a playable line. But at this stage of the game, we're very early in the week. I think that you might see a few different lines drop that could potentially be playable from an under 2.5 or under 1.5 standpoint. I don't think Motta is just going to sit back and get picked apart like he did against Ogden. I think that he might have learned his lesson there, and the lights could go out too. So he's going to have to be aggressive if he wants to win this fight.
Yeah, I completely agree. And bookies already have us beaten on this one here. Under 1.5, minus 220. That's disgusting. Like it probably hits. But at what point do you hold your nose and go over 1.5 here and just hope they can get out of the second round, man?
Could happen.
Oh, that's whenever they do that on the 1.5s, man, unless we're talking heavyweights, I'd like to try to argue for the plus money going the other way. I don't know if I can on this one though, with the combination of the inexperience, the height and reach, and the chin concerns. Yeah, it's got to be an under here, but they're not doing you any favors. So folks, we don't get props and stuff like that on the US side of things until usually like Wednesday, Thursday, depending on DK and FanDuel, that kind of stuff. But Bet Online does get these numbers out early. Now, they're not always a 1-to-1 ratio. Sometimes we see a couple dollars worth of difference in some of these numbers. But Motta by knockout, for example, which would be his only path to victory here, is plus 325. His money line is plus 270. That's one of those ones where, like, I wouldn't get fancy. If you're going to play the dog, the money line is juicy enough. There's not a big enough difference between those two numbers to make it worth my while, I wouldn't think, to go for that. So very, very interesting fight here. I'll be not surprised whatsoever, no matter what happens. If Motta pulls off the upset, I'm not going to be shocked. I think this number is bad. You know, Nolan being a favorite makes sense to me. Minus 350, minus 400. That's too much. All right. Next up, we've got Westin Wilson taking on Gene Silva, and another just absolutely massive favorite here, Mike. Another one that I think is a little bit of a head scratcher here for me. So we've got Gene Silva sitting currently at minus 800, I believe, the biggest favorite on the card. And I am not overly familiar with either of these fighters. So just to let you all know, take everything I say with a grain of salt. This one's definitely going to be a little bit of kind of sit back and learn in this kind of a spot. Silva's 11-2. Won a decision on Dana White's Contender Series. He's a member of the Fighting Nerds, which that's all the hype right now, Mike, is the Fighting Nerds are making waves. Everyone, you have that name attached to you, and you're immediately jumped up the price tag just a little bit there. He's a very flowing karate-style striker on the feet, very bouncy, relaxed, kind of steps into those big power body kicks. He's got a nice active lead hand, a good jab, good footwork. I like the way this guy kind of moves around the cage, but honestly, he plays with his hands too low for me a little bit, Mike. I know that's a style. I know you can find angles and opportunities when you sucker your opponent in and feints and things like that. It opens up a lot of different things that not everybody's capable of doing, but he seems to do it to the point of almost detrimental. Like, he gets hit looking for that opportunity. I don't know that Gene Silva is quite up to par with the rest of the other Fighting Nerds, if I'm being honest. Lots of finishes on the regional scene, but pretty weak level of competition pre-Dana White's Contender Series. So I'm not really sure exactly how dangerous this man actually is. Westin Wilson, 16-8. coming off of the sacrifice to Joanderson Brito in his UFC debut, round one, just destruction from a guy who might be able to challenge for a title or be a contender here pretty quick. Westin Wilson has a 100% finish rate. He's also a karate style guy, long and lanky, skinny limbs. He does have quick back takes. I like his choking game. He does a good job with the body lock, the body triangle. He's a very aggressive finisher. He's got a 100% finish rate, like I mentioned, but also a weak level of competition. I kind of christened him the new Jordan Wright when we broke down his first fight against Joanderson Brito, because I think he's a guy with the offense, Mike, that'll catch somebody. Like one of these days, he's gonna flatline somebody, and it'll be his shining moment in the UFC. But he'll go like 1-4 and then get cut from the organization. That's kind of what I'm expecting from Westin Wilson here. 4 submission losses, 2 KO losses, but he will have a 4-inch height and reach advantage in this spot. Call me crazy, Mike, but I actually would look dog or pass in this position. I mean, this number is ridiculous and unplayable on the Silva side. I don't know who's betting him here at this number. I think it's absolute insanity. And the thing that would actually tickle my fancy would be a Westin Wilson by sub. This guy likes to attack like ankles and leg locks. He was rolling for a heel on Joanderson Brito. Obviously, that didn't go well for him, but he is bigger. He is longer. He does have that size advantage. That's something I think he can actually put to use against Gene Silva. And if they're both playing the same karate point style striking game, when this fight gets extended, if Westin Wilson says, forget this, let's grapple, I actually think he might be able to put that to use. And I'm not saying Gene Silva has like some grappling deficiency that I'm trying to target, but I know Westin Wilson's got grappling offense that he's maybe not getting credit for. And at 11-1, that might be worth a sprinkle. If you're going to do anything, I would be careful on this fight. If anything, it would be a dart. It would be a very small dart throw, not a big investment, nothing like that. But dog or pass for me, Mike. What do you make of this one?
It's funny how you compared Westin Wilson to Jordan Wright. You know what I had written down here? Jordan Wright. I had Julian Erosa. I had a poor man's version of Julian Erosa.
Juicy J.
It's funny. Juicy J can crack and he can also grapple. But I was watching Westin Wilson fights back, and you know, you do the tape and you see him get caught in a go-go plata, and that was a cause for concern. And Gian Silva, you watch him, and he I believe went to a decision on the Contender Series. Am I correct about that?
Correct.
Yes. So the guy, matchups make everything, right? There's styles make fights, they say. And this is a style where you want to hear a raunchy number. How about minus 350 under 1.5? That's what we have right now. Wow. Under 1.5 minus 350. Oh my gosh. So how do you attack this one? This is one of the challenges that we have, Clint, tonight, is that lines for these, I know the props haven't been out that long, but the money lines have been out for a few weeks now. So the sharps have gotten in, the public's starting to get in. You know, they want to find their angle here. And this fight, I am not playing the favorite here, Silva, at minus 800 or so. And I am going to be watching this with an ice cold beverage in my hand. And I might only have a minute or two with that beverage, because this fight likely will end very, very early. And I think that Wilson, if you want to talk, Clint, I have to mention this too. This was a mercy booking. You watch what happened with Joanderson Brito, and how did this guy earn another fight? He got completely annihilated the first time around. So this was a mercy booking by Dana White, and I am not a fan of banking on either fighters. I believe that I'm not a gunslinger, so I'm going to sit back and pick my spots, but I will be enjoying watching. Maybe there'll be some blood splattered across the octagon, and we'll have a little bit more kumite action going on inside of the octagon. I can watch some blood sport highlights.
There you go.
But I don't think that you should put your money on either fighter in this fight. I do think that the odds of this going under are fairly high, but I'm not willing to. Minus 350 for an under 1.5. What the hell is going on here?
When a guy just went to a decision, Mike, can you not see these guys clawing at each other for 15 minutes? Like they both like that outside kicking game. Can you not see these guys just kind of picking and poking and trying not to get made fools of on national television?
I could, but I think that Silva's I think Silva's going to be extremely aggressive here. And I think that Wilson's going to he's prone to making bonehead mistakes. He was actually winning the fight before he got caught in the go-go plata. So I don't trust either fighter here, and I think that this is a good. I don't want to say go to the bathroom because you want to watch the finishes, and a skill that I'm trying to develop. I'm putting this out there too is the overs, and I'm not willing to bank on an over 1.5 in this spot though. I'll tell you that much, Clint.
You know what, man? And now that you mentioned it, I would be tempted because, like I said, I could see these guys both taking it just a little bit slow. And you're right, Gene Silva may be aggressive, but he might not have a willing dance partner. You might see Wilson, who just got finished, just got knocked out, doesn't want to do that again, and he might lean on that grappling, and he might look to keep the distance. And both these guys might skirt the outside of the cage, look for that angle, and this fight definitely could extend it, man. I didn't even look at the total yet because I'm not used to having them available this early. But plus 275 for an over 1.5 when Gene Silva isn't at all tested at this level. That's got me perked up a little bit, man. Just so you guys know, if you're not familiar with the game of my boy Mike's MMA picks, very, very different approaches between me and my guy. He is extremely calculated. He is extremely careful. He plays more of the sniper role, whereas I am Terminator 2, you machine gun on top of the building, firing at everything I want to. Like that. That's how I play the game. So Mike probably has a very solid approach that works. Not probably, he has a very solid approach that works for him. But I will absolutely throw a dart at a big number if I think that if I make that bet time and time again, eventually it'll pay off. So plus 275 over 1.5. Definitely get a little chin scratch out of me for that one. I might look at that. And shout out my guy C Dell here in the chat. Nailed it. Fireball and popcorn fight, baby. That is correct. Grab a drink, grab a snack. Use the bathroom during the post-fight interview, not before the fight. All right, next up, we got Farid Basharat taking on Taylor Lapilus, and they are not making life easy on us here this week, Mike. This is a really, really intriguing fight. Now, we've talked about a couple fights that are tough because we don't know the fighters. We've talked about a couple fights that are tough because of the stylistic matchup. And this one falls more into the latter category here. We're very familiar with Taylor Lapilus and Farid Basharat at this point in the game. Now, the Bash Bros, they are the Sean O'Malley's of Dana White's Contender Series. They are those legit prospects, those hidden gems that they've discovered and have transitioned into the UFC, immediately making waves. Farid is 11-0, still undefeated, coming in off a big round one finish over Klitzen Rodriguez, who, might I mention, Mike, was a bit of a hype train himself coming off of Dana White's Contender Series. People had big hopes for Klitzen Rodriguez, and Farid dusted him in the first round. Now, that was a bit of a punishment for missing weight a couple times. They threw him up a weight class and said, okay, fine, make weight or you're stuck here with this. So I think that was the UFC maybe sending Klitzen Rodriguez a message, but still, it was easy. Farid took him out in the first round, no problems. He's got beautiful grappling, just gorgeous timing on his level changes, flowing, strong positional top game. He's got that position over submission type of approach, heavy shoulder pressure. He does not make mistakes from on top of his opponent's grappling. And then when you do, he immediately takes advantage of it. Now, he has that opportunistic finishing ability, but he's also more than happy to grind out a win if that's what it takes. Like with the Basharat Bros, you cannot necessarily count on them winning inside the distance every single time, because if they can jab your face off for 15 minutes and win that way, and that is the least path of resistance, they will take that approach. So for me, the Bash Bros, trying to remind everybody, they're more of a money line play for me. I don't like to get fancy with the props on there because they could finish, but that might not be the game plan. And you're not going to figure out the game plan until they get locked into the cage on Saturday night. At any rate, well-rounded, love the game. It does make me a little nervous when they split the pairs up. So like they've had the Bash Bros together on every card so far. It's almost like a UFC sink or swim moment where it's like, we're not putting you guys as the highlight on this one. You're not with your bro. You guys got to do it on your own now. It always makes me just a little bit nervous when they do that the first time, because I almost feel like they fail that first effort when they get split up and they're not on the card together anymore. We saw that with I'm blanking out. What was the last brother pair that we got, Mike?
I know who you're talking about.
The
Brazilians.
Terrence McKinney fight. Who was
Yes. Oh my gosh.
What are their
Dalby.
names?
Dalby ended up beating one of them. Oh my god, why am I drawing a blank too?
Neither of us.
Nikolas Dalby
is gonna bug me. Yes, Nikolas Dalby. See, like we know all the people they fought, just not them. The Bonfim. Thank you, Cedel. The Bonfim brothers. That's exactly what happened. They split them up and the Bonfim bros immediately sank. So like that's, again, just not anything technical or special. Just it always makes me a little bit nervous when they pull that move. Taylor Lapilus, 19-3. This is his second UFC stint, Mike. He got back on the Paris card, had a good strategic victory in his first fight. And you know, when he first got to the UFC, he had a 3-1 run. So not a bad run. And I would need to go back and remind myself what happened as to why the UFC didn't keep him. I'm not sure if it was because he wasn't exciting. I'm not sure if it was because MMA was still technically illegal in Paris and he was training in a basement. I don't remember. It was something, but they brought him back around and he is exceptionally strategic. Lightning fast jab. He's one of these guys who's sneaky athletic, but he doesn't really fight like it. You know, most athletic guys want to break you in half using their physical ability. He's not that guy. He jabs, he sets up his cross. He's got good movement, really nice footwork, good takedown defense. He's got these sneaky quick knees to the body that he'll tap you with when you're in those clinch situations. I really like his game. Taylor Lapilus is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here in this spot. And I think that could be a factor if we're not able to get the grappling going with Farid Basharat. This is going to be a very technical striking matchup and one that I'm not sure either guy is going to be capable of knocking their opponent out. We've had a bunch of unders where it's been 1.5, minus 300, like we were talking about. The over 2.5 is minus 245 on this one. And I think that's appropriate. These two guys probably will have a very technical fight, Mike. And in that case, I don't want to lay minus 300 on Farid Basharat. That's where he's sitting right about now. Taylor Lapilus at plus 250, I think might be just a little bit disrespectful. I think we have a live dog at that number, but I'm also not as interested to play it because I'm not fading the Bash Bros until they give me a reason to. I wouldn't mind a split decision prop on this one, Mike. DraftKings puts that thing out there now and again, and it's plus 400, plus 500. I think we could get a really close competitive fight on this one here. What do you think?
You took the words right out of my mouth. When I was about to say, I'm not going to go out of my way to fade Farid Basharat, like especially to start the new year. You know, you want your first plays of the year to hit. You know, then you've got some extra money to work with. So, man, but Lapilus, you know, he can fight. He's coming off of a win over a mini version of Marvin Vettori. And you watch that fight, man, that kid can, he's like a little Marvin Vettori, and he didn't take that loss well. But Lapilus, you know, he's got solid cardio, he's got great footwork, and he's going to need it inside of the octagon. And the Farid, the Basharat brothers, don't let their physiques fool you. They are strong and they are positionally sound, like you mentioned. So I do like, if I was to play an over, this would be the one, to be honest. Both of them are, they're very keen to their striking defense. They pay attention to where the strikes are coming. I noticed they're moving their head off the center line, and they look out for the kicks to the body as well. They'll check leg kicks. You know, I like what I see from both fighters here. And one thing I have to say, Clint, initially this line got down to minus 170 for Farid Basharat at Bet Online. That's a pretty sharp book. And then it hung there for a while, and then it went back up. I think the public might have taken it to where it is now. But yeah, I think the over 2.5 is actually the play here. And if there was going to be one of those overs that I ended up making, and that is very rare for me to make, this would be one of them. This would be the one.
I like that. I like it, Mike. I mean, not everybody likes or appreciates the big favorite type of numbers. Minus 245 for an over 2.5. Sometimes it's just the right move, though. I don't like it myself. I tend to look for plus money more often than I look for these giant chalky numbers. But yeah, man, I've got a hard time seeing either of these guys give up a finish. And they're both so technical and they're both so tough and durable. I think over 2.5 minus 245. That's the move if you're gonna play this one. Don't worry about who wins. Just lean on the durability. Hope these guys get to a decision and don't even bother sweating who wins it.
May I mention it opened at minus 205, so it's been bumped up about 40 cents. Now, is that was the first jump in odds that I've seen? I haven't seen a second jump, so I'm seeing a 246, 220 to 270. So it's starting to move, and it's Monday.
Yep. That's usually some decent steam when that happens, just because the totals don't tend to get hit all that hard in MMA. So if they're moving the number that aggressively, that's probably a good sign for it being the right direction. I'm not a market analyst. You'd have to catch a regular frequent flyer on the show, guest and friend guys like Liam Picks Fight, stuff like that, for like that deep market analysis, that kind of thing. I'm trying to learn from him, Mike. I really am, but he's much better at that kind of thing than I am. So I guess we'll have to jump into one of his live streams and ask later on in the week.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Next up, we've got, nope, we just talked about that one. That's my bad, everybody. I was not prepared, apparently, to flip over to the next fight. So my mistake. The next fight we really do want to talk to you about is Marcus McGhee returning versus Gaston Bolaños. And everybody knows Marcus McGhee at this point, Mike. He has made a big splash in the UFC, and let's just get it out of the way. Whether you're new, old, returning, know me, don't know me, the one thing that I seem to be famous for from last year, Mike, is not the 88 units worth of profit. It's the fact that I bet more than 1 unit on JP buys when he faced Marcus McGhee, and that aged like milk in Phoenix. It didn't do me any favors. Nobody let me hear the end of it. It was a big deal for me to have swung and missed on that spot. So if that tells you anything, I've got my doubts about Mr. Marcus McGhee. I thought someone like JP Buys would be able to go to work using the grappling and maybe cause him some issues. Didn't happen. Marcus McGhee showed his power in that fight and put JP Buys down unceremoniously. Very physically strong, 100% finish rate, fighting out of Arizona here at the MMA Lab. He's got great cardio, man. He took his UFC debut on short notice and broke his opponent, finishing him in the second round. And you could see that he was completely out of gas and just mentally willed himself to continue and continued fighting at a pace and pressure when he wasn't prepared for that type of a fight camp wise. So I love everything I've seen from Marcus McGhee, just like everybody else does at this point. The one thing that I want to kind of remind everybody of is that even though he's apparently a very dangerous grappler, he's almost a throwback Chuck Liddell type. He likes to use that grappling in reverse. Unless he's got like an opportunity for a finishing sequence, he's not out here hunting takedowns or wrestling like some of the lab guys are. He wants to strike. He wants to go to work with his hands. And he does seem to ratchet the intensity up over the course of the fight. And I do like guys that do that, where they'll kind of feel their opponents out early, and the deeper the fight goes, the harder they push. They tend to break their opponents in those kinds of positions, and not everybody's able to keep up with that kind of pace the deeper the fight gets. So I've come around on Marcus McGhee quite a bit. He is currently sitting as a minus 260 favorite. Gaston Bolaños, another one of these weird journey type of fighters. He was fighting over in Bellator, and the UFC stole him at 31 years of age. Another rarity, Mike. We don't see many people hop from Bellator to the UFC. So they had to see something they liked in this kid. And I think I know what it is. Ever since the Dana White Contender Series era of UFC, it's less about the best and it's more about the excitement. It's more about the product. This guy's a banger. He's a reckless killer be killed type of striker. His favorite move is the spinning elbow. He will throw no less than 3 of them per fight. He's just all out action all the time. He's fun to watch, loads up on big body kicks. And I don't think he's UFC caliber. I don't believe he's going to have a long, successful run in the UFC organization. He's going to be fun to watch, He'll win a couple fights. He'll catch a couple guys. But this is the kind of fight that they'll put him in where Marcus McGhee is just a little bit better than him, just a little bit stronger than him, just a little bit more durable than him. And he's going to end up finding a way to win this fight, even though Gaston Bolaños is probably going to look like he's on par with McGhee in the first round, might even crack him and hurt him once or twice. But at the end of the day, I think McGhee will wear him down and then end up taking over. I kind of like a club and sub here, Mike. We saw that in Marcus McGee's UFC debut as he hurt his opponent and then grabbed the neck once it hit the ground. And I think that's the way you've got to get rid of Bolaños, because he gets a little tired. He slows down just a touch, but he's tough. He's durable, and I don't think it's going to be easy to knock him out clean. I think it'll be a TKO or a submission, not like a clean knockout. So that's the way I would look a round 2 or round 3 finish from McGhee. I don't know if I'm ready to trust him at minus 260. We talked about the parlay busters to start the night, and one of these guys is going to do it. One of these dogs is going to bark, Mike. There's too many minus 200 favorites on this card. I'm not sure who it is, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Marcus McGhee to go ahead and keep the good times rolling. What about you?
It's interesting to see the influx of Peruvian fighters as well. Now you look at McGee's age. He's 33 years old, so he's no spring chicken, but it's nice to see a fighter in their UFC debut come in and break their opponent on short notice. I love seeing that. Said Yakub Kakaramanov is a fighter who also really put it on his opponent. And I believe that in this spot, the MMA lab in Phoenix, they're training their fighters, and there's multiple fighters from that camp on this card. You got Mario Bautista, who's fighting out of MMA lab as well. Man, it could potentially be a striker's delight, but I think that McGhee would be better served taking this fight to the mat. Bolaños is a tough fighter who, but then you look at his victory here against Aaron Phillips, who really is one of the, I hate saying it, but he's lower level opponent. And this fight, I got to pick McGhee. And I think that if you are a parlay guy, this might be one of the pieces. I'll say that. But you do mention the spinning attacks are an issue, and also that the kid is willing to dig deep. And by kid, I mean he's 3 years younger or 2 years younger than a 33-year-old Marcus McGhee. So it's not like these are two prospects either. These are seasoned veterans. Unless they started at a very at an old age, it's where are the prospects on this card? Next up, we're going to be talking about a couple of prospect fights, but here I'll be picking Marcus McGhee. And like you said, I could see a club and sub, and we've seen him lock up a submission in the past. I believe he stepped in for Brian Kelleher on short notice at one point, right?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think he did.
So Journey Newsom. I think that McGhee was supposed to fight Kelleher, and then Journey Newsom stepped in. So
I see.
I corrected myself there. But McGhee inside the distance will be the pick for me.
Okay. I like it, Mike. I like it a lot. I think you're right. And I'm glad you mentioned his last fight with Phillips, because I actually really think I identified something and I mentioned in my breakdown of Marcus McGhee. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around all over here, guys. It's been a couple weeks. We'll get into the flow. It'll smooth out couple episodes in. I apologize. I'm stumbling a little bit much. In the fight with Aaron Phillips, we saw that Gaston Bolaños was very susceptible to be taken down. He didn't have hardly any difficulty, Phillips, taking Bolaños to the ground. He didn't have the technical knowledge or the skill to keep him there. So Phillips couldn't keep the man down, let him get up, took his back very easily, mind you. So hit multiple takedowns in the same round. This is 34-year-old Aaron Phillips, who I talked about being a guy that I think is just never going to capture his potential, Mike. He made his UFC debut in 2020 against Jack Shore, got choked out immediately. We had high hopes for this guy, but then it did not look like he was even training anymore. Like, you look at his online socials and stuff like that, it seems like he's taking more of the coaching path. And it seemed almost like a take this fight or you're cut position against Bolaños in 2023. And even though he had his moments, sure enough, he lost that fight. He might be done. I don't think we see Aaron Phillips in the UFC again. I would be really surprised at this point, quite frankly, if we did. But that is not a good look for Bolaños, in my opinion. If that's the guy that's able to ground you, take your back, body triangle you, no problem. Taking on somebody who's much fresher, even though he's a bit older, McGhee is far more dangerous and hungry, and he's active when compared to somebody like Phillips. I do think grappling is the path. I think it'll be there. It's easy. It's just a matter of whether or not he wants to take it. Because, like I mentioned, he uses that grappling in reverse. He likes to bang. And if he chooses to bang with Bolaños, I still think he can win the fight. I still think he probably breaks him and works him over the course of the fight. But I really think this could be over relatively easily if he takes him down. All right, next fight up, we've got Matthew Semelsberger taking on Preston Parsons. Love this fight, Mike. Matt Semelsberger doing the UFC and us a favor, filling in here on short notice to take on Preston Parsons. And he's been a thorn in the side of basically every gambler out there. People do not know what to make of Matt Semelsberger. To me, he seems like a guy who's decent everywhere, but he's not great anywhere. He's 31 years old. He's got a great frame for the weight class. He's got a hell of a beard on him when he decides to grow the dang thing out, but he's 11-6. He's long. I like his straight punches. He's got decent power. He dropped Arlovski in his last fight in the first round, and a lot of people really thought he was going to get him out of there via knockout early. Didn't manage to follow up on him and put him away. Ended up getting finished himself in the third, and he's taken a lot of damage. You know, back and forth war with Jeremiah Wells, back and forth battle where he got busted up badly against Alex Morono. He's tough as nails, man. 3-3 in his last 6, but I'm starting to wonder if the damage isn't catching up with him. I feel like Matt Semelsberger is a guy who's just been beat to hell in almost every single fight he's been in. He's another action fighter, and he's just not improving at the rate that I kind of expected, Mike. I thought Semelsberger would get better quicker and turn the corner, and we'd see him go on a bit more of a win streak. Instead, the 3 losses are very recently. He's 1-3 in his last 4, even though he's 3-3 in his last 6. So it's not really a great look for him. He's losing to the guys who are pretty legitimate. You know, Arlovski, Jeremiah Wells, Alex Morono. Oddly enough, he's got a great win over Jake Matthews wedged in the middle of those there. So I have a hard time understanding just what this guy is good at, because I'll be honest with you, if you are losing to Alex Morono, I wouldn't pick you to be beating Jake Matthews immediately after. So it's a very confusing situation. We've got a near pick'em price tag on this. And so then the question all comes down to his opponent, Preston Parsons, 10-4. They call the man Pressure. And I love that nickname for him. 28 years old. This guy is a monster grappler. He is absolutely a pressure fighter. 2-1 so far in the UFC. Hasn't fought in almost a year. And if you've been watching this show for any amount of time, you guys know I love when these fighters are in those prime years and they take a break like that. Because especially coming off of a loss, you take a year off, they come back better. Unless they've like blown their knee out or something like that, Mike, that time is spent in the lab. They come back hungrier, a new wrinkle in their game. You always see improvement from them after they take that kind of a break. Now, he made his UFC debut, gets KO'd against D-Rod, but that's a pretty tough matchup for your first fight. Puts on a show against Evan Elder, gets on the horse in his second fight. And then of course, my nemesis, lost money betting against Trevin Giles in his most recent fight. He dropped a split decision, which was very, very close, Mike. Very competitive. There was an argument to be made that maybe Preston Parsons did enough to get that win, but it was very tight. So the split, I can't argue against it all that much. He's got very aggressive BJJ. He is very fast at advancing his positions. If he gets to the ground, he's immediately looking to jump up to a side control, a half guard, a mount. He does not sit on top of you in wet blanket. He's hunting subs. 9 wins by submission. That's definitely his weapon of choice. And he's another one of these guys that seems to get better and break people the deeper the fight goes. Now, that was the key against Trevin Giles for me, Mike. I thought he was going to break Trevin Giles. We've seen him get tired and make mistakes deep in the fight. I thought that's what was going to happen. But Giles managed to go ahead and pull one out on me there. I think this is a spot where maybe Parsons can get right. Matt Semelsberger, we've seen him accept bottom. We've seen him fail on some subs. We've seen him get a little too high transitioning, even when he's in dominant position on people's backs and things of that nature. I kind of feel like in the small cage, this fight hits the ground. And I think Preston Parsons is the better grappler of the two. So for me, this would be another dog or pass situation. It's not much of a dog. I know it's a very cheap number here. I think we're looking at minus 120 and plus 105, but I think I like Preston Parsons.
Yeah. Interesting spot. Preston Parsons is, I believe, 28 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And I was listening to an interview that he did with John Coe over at All Star Sport, and he did a great job basically breaking everything down. And what concerns me, I mean, I know Trey Ogden performed well as a coach and a fighter, and you look at Preston Parsons, he says he has his own gym. He's only 28 years of age, and pressure breaks pipes. You hear that, but the challenge is he's going to have to walk and close distance with. He's going to have to do it in an intelligent manner against Matt Semelsberger, who does land those straight punches. But like you mentioned, Clint, earlier, I think that Mr. Matt Semelsberger has potentially plateaued here as far as career trajectory goes. He may have already reached his peak. And I feel like Preston Parsons has much more upside at this stage in his career. I too lost money on Preston Parsons live, though, in that Giles fight. He had that in the bag. There were a few situations where if he just maintained position instead of submission, he would have won the fight. And he ended up just losing position. So he's got to hopefully during this camp, during those 9 or 10 months that he's had on the sidelines, really worked on burning top time in top position. I think that is a key to success here, a recipe for success, because Semelsberger does not have great grappling. Watch back the AJ Fletcher fight. AJ Fletcher was starting to have some success there, but give me the underdog here. I think that he is I think that he's live in this spot, and I think there's a little bit of value here, but everything with trepidation, I must add. This is a situation where this is a very closely lined fight.
Completely agree with you there, Mike. And I like a lot of chalk this week, man. I'll be honest with you. I think the favorites mostly tend to roll and are set up to be successful in a lot of these spots. So I'm having a tough time arguing for some of these dogs and being willing to actually put my hard-earned money on them. I think Preston might be the first one that I would seriously take a look at as far as I think being a live dog. And I got to tell you guys, unfortunately, so I know a lot of you like the content that I put up on Twitter, on Instagram. We do the live reactions to the decisions and things like that. If you're not on Twitter and Instagram, regularly speaking, then you probably missed the news. Regularly during those sessions, you guys got very familiar with my boy Link, my dog Link. We have Link and Zelda. Link unfortunately didn't make it through Christmas this year. My boy had a heart murmur since he was a puppy, and we always knew it was going to be a problem as he got older. And we thought we had, the doctors told us probably 2 years that we were going to get with him, and he went so fast. It declined incredibly rapidly. And unfortunately, it was the weekend that we literally were leaving to go share Christmas with my family that he didn't make it through the night. So that was a tough battle that we had to go through, something we're still healing from, going into the new year. So he won't be in those videos anymore, but I want to thank everybody on Twitter for the kind words, the shout outs. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is not for clicks. It's not for your sympathy. It's because somebody brought me just the most amazing suggestion, Mike, on Twitter, is that in his memory, every episode from now on, we are going to have the Link Memorial Dog of the Week. Wow. And I need a better drop for this. I got to go through my camera, get, a video of him howling or something like that. We got to come up with something good for this. But we're going to pick a spot every single week where we've got the Link Memorial Dog of the Week. And for me this week, I think that is going to be Preston Parsons. I don't know if we're going to track that or what we're going to do with it yet, but something a little bit of fun helped me keep the memory of my boy near and dear to our heart here. But I think this is the one, Mike. I think we'll make the first ever Link Memorial Dog of the Week, Preston Parsons, and I probably have to bet it. If it's the first one ever, I think I've got to sack up and put some money on it. Don't you think?
I hope it hits, and may memories of that you made with Link together carry you through. This is a beautiful thing, and I'm happy to be a part of it with you. That was a great shot you had of Link with those with the dollar bills, man.
That's my money chain, man. That we threw it on him, and funniest little picture of him. That was that's a good one. Thank you though, man. I appreciate you. And everybody in the chat as well, all the kind words. Shout out to our guy Sean here saying Gervonta Tank Davis, the 129-0 pay-per-view star, 135 pounds. Thank you very much, Sean, for the donation. We appreciate that here at Pub Sports Radio. Appreciate you tuning in and watching, and shout out to Tank Davis, of course, absolutely one of the GOATs. Mike, we got to pay some bills here real quick. Give me just a moment. First and foremost, you guys all know this is Pub Sports Radio, your home for the Die Hard MMA podcast. Make sure you check out pubsportsradio.com. We do give away $100 every single weekend in a free entry contest here on Pub Sports Radio. So sign up, create an account. All you got to do is pick the fighter, pick the round, pick the method right here on the site. And if you win each week, the winner gets $100. It's that simple. You get belts. So as you continue to win, your record will be tracked. And then, of course, you can see the personalities from Pub Sports Radio, the picks, the bets they put together. Those are tracked here on the site as well. So you can see my gorgeous little face right there with the couple of plays that I have already put out here on the site. Next up, we've got Spectation Sports. MMA is back, not only for the UFC, but for all the regional shows. And we've talked about it before. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to get familiar with rising talent. We've got Lights Out Championship, Cage Titans coming around with Joe Giannetti having reclaimed their title. There's lots of MMA action coming on the regional scene, and you can get familiar with those fighters as they come up before they get to Dana White's Contender Series. Make sure you use promo code DIEHARD when you sign up for a 20% discount on that membership. Next up, we've got the Sharp app. I can help you out with MMA. They've got models, they've got pro bettors, they've got the Proptimizer, which, by the way, is like working magic. They find the edge, and it actually tells you a star rating and the edge percentage on prop bets and where you can find the best numbers for them. It's a wonderful tool. They've got a great Discord. Make sure you check out the Sharp app. There will be a link to the Sharp app in the system here below. And then next up, you guys know what's coming. You know what's coming. It's Bet Openly. Of course it's Bet Openly, but I got something special. I got something special for you here this week, all right? I've talked to you about Bet Openly. I've talked to you about how you can save money long-term, 1% juice. It's a wonderful platform. I'm absolutely in love with it. We're cutting out the bookies. We're saving money. That's best for us as gamblers. But what we've done to celebrate the MMA world coming back here in the start of 2024 is we've created a contest. We have got the MMA Gauntlet, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be a blast. If you don't have a Bet Openly account, if you haven't signed up yet, now is the chance. Now is the time. We're going to give away $600 on Bet Openly, okay? First place, $300. Second place, $200. Third place, $100. It's a contest, 6 weeks, the first 6 events of the MMA year here in 2024. Sign up, deposit $50. If you've already got an account, make sure you start with $50. It's a $50 bankroll challenge. One bet per week, 6 weeks in a row, UFC MMA only. It could be a total, it could be a money line, it could be a parlay. Doesn't matter. Just make sure you're betting one MMA bet per week. I'm going to make a Twitter thread every single week, and you have to bet all 6 weeks in a row. If you miss a week, you've not run the gauntlet. You're out. If you go heavy and aggressive trying to win this thing early and you bust your $50, you're out. So you have to post the ticket for your play, post the ticket after it's been graded, and whoever makes the most money after 6 weeks then will get ranked 1, 2, and 3 for first, second, and third. And we're giving away $600. It's on Twitter. I can only manage it on Twitter. We're not going to do an extra one for Instagram. Sorry, IG people, but this one's for the Twitter people. Make a Twitter. Come hang out. Find me on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod, and I will post the link for you to sign up. Get in here. Bet Openly $600 giveaway for the Gauntlet 2024 UFC contest. I'm excited about it. So come hang out, make some free money. Mike, welcome back to the show. We are talking about UFC Vegas 84. And if you guys don't know my guy, make sure you follow at Mike's MMA Picks on Twitter as well.
Thank you, Clint. Ready to go. Let's keep on rocking, my brother.
Yes, sir. Let's get straight on into it. Next up, Andrei Arlovski returns, taking on Waldo, Cortes-Acosta. And last year, Mike, I christened 2023 the year of the changing guard. And that worked out well for me. In these spots where you've got an older veteran, somebody we're familiar with, somebody who we love, you just fade the shit out of them. Like when the UFC, it's the hurt business, man. You don't stay around forever. And when you're old, the UFC will look to feed you to the young up and coming talent. Now, certain people like Mr. Andrei Arlovski, he kind of defied Father Time for a bit. And he was able to squeeze by a couple, way too many split decisions. He was able to squeeze by and steal our money in certain spots. But eventually Father Time catches up. Father Time is undefeated. The only man to ever survive him is Robbie Lawler riding off into the sunset the way that he did. This is going to continue, I believe, in 2024. We've got a lot of matchups that are set up where the young generation is set to take the position of the old ones. And finally, we are seeing the durability of Andrei Arlovski crack. It makes me sad. It's tough. It's unfortunate. It's the game we play. I think this is Waldo Cortes-Acosta all day, Mike. What Montel Mays did, and I think he probably knocks him out, Mike.
You know, it's amazing the longevity for Andrei Arlovski at heavyweight. This is a guy who came into his professional career and was brutally knocked out in his first fight. I posted that brutal knockout a few days ago on Twitter, and you look at his record now, 34 wins and 22 losses at heavyweight. Oh my goodness gracious. That's a lot of damage, Clint. That's a lot of damage and a lot of strikes absorbed over the course of time. And Waldo Cortes-Acosta, he's not great at one thing. He's decent as far as peppering his opponents with strikes at range. I'll give him that. And a win over Lucas Brzeski does not speak volumes to me, but at this stage in Andrei Arlovski's career, closing in on his 45th birthday, how much does he have left in his tank? You know, he's getting, I know he's getting paid a lot of money for each time he shows up, and he does bring a large contingency of ATT teammates and fans, and they usually make themselves heard, especially if you paid close attention to his bout versus Jake Collier. Oh my goodness gracious. That I said it twice, but I think that Acosta is the side here, but at the number that we're talking, I mean, the current number, have you seen the current number? It is a little disturbing here. We're talking minus 650. So I'm not willing to pay that price. And the question for me is, does Arlovski get finished at this stage in his career? Clint, do you think that he gets finished?
I would think that he probably does, Mike. I really think that he does. I'm with you. I'm not overly impressed with Brzeski. I don't think he's very good. But Waldo handling business is more what speaks volumes there to me. It's that he recognized what he's capable of. You know, the fight before that, I think he put up like 120 significant strikes or something like that. He was way more of a pitter patter, pick and poke type of guy. And then he said, you know what? That's not paying the bills. Sat down on a punch or two. And would you look at that? Knocks his man out pretty quickly. I kind of think he's going to get a taste for that. You know, we see fighters fall in love with their hands all the time. And I think that's what's going to happen with Waldo. I think he also is going to see what happened to Andrei Arlovski in his last fight and know that it's very possible for him to hurt this man on the feet.
Yeah, the human chin can only take so much. Every chin has a shelf life.
It's very true. So yeah, Waldo by KO for me. I went parlay a little earlier in the week. Like Mike said, numbers getting a little out of hand now. So, you know, do with that what you will. Personally, I absolutely still think he's the side and would still throw him in parlays. You're not going to get as good of a return on that at this point. But that's the way that I have and would still continue to play it at this point. I think Andrei's finally hit the age cliff here.
Are you ready to talk chins? Because I believe we have a fighter who has a chin issue up next.
What an intro to our next fight. Phil Hawes takes on Brunno Ferreira, and talk about chins. Mike, you teed this one up perfectly because we've got two guys that live and die by the quality of their chins, and I'm not quite sure what to make of either of them. Phil Hawes, he is one hell of an athlete, man. He looks like he's in and potentially winning every single fight that he's in right up until the moment that he dies. The chin just fails and the lights get shut off immediately. Brunno Ferreira, I believe they call this man the Hulk, and for good reason. He's got massive power, 10-1 coming from Brazil, made himself known in his UFC debut by KOing Gregory Rodriguez Robocop with a jab, mind you, not an overhand, not a cross, jabbed him and put him down like a sack of potatoes, and then turned around and got knocked out in the first round against Rozaboev in his very next fight. So I'm not sure exactly what to make of the Hulk in this spot either. Is he a meme fighter that got his one win and will never taste victory ever again? Or is he a guy that can take a better shot against anybody not named Rozaboev? I'm not sure what to do, Mike. Talk to me about this fight, man. What do you make of these guys, and how do you see this playing out?
The world finds out on Saturday night, and like we saw in the chat, fight ends by KO might be the best playable number there is at this stage in the game, unless you want to take and pick a certain side of this fight, because originally I believe Ferreira was a dog here for a while, and now he's the favorite. And you watch the chin. I was at Phil Hawes's last fight. He came out to the rock theme song against Ikram Alaskarov, and he had his moments for a few seconds there and then was brutally knocked out, and he was unconscious for literally minutes. And Rogan, I couldn't hear the broadcast, but I could see how there was pandemonium by the octagon, and they were trying to resuscitate him, and he eventually came to. So I'm wondering what the heck he's doing getting back into the cage here against Ferreira, who could potentially put his lights out again. I was at the Borgata hotel in Atlantic City to watch Ferreira when he knocked out Gregory Rodriguez, and this has knockout written all over it. And I think that you want to talk volatility, you want to talk strikes landing and pops on the button. This is going to be one of them. I lean Ferreira here. The problem is he does not have the wrestling to back it up. He's short, he's stout, and I think whoever finds the target first could potentially win. But I also think that Hawes, it just takes one strike. Remember, Curtis was able to take him out of there and put him on wobbly legs real quick. So give me Ferreira here. But, man, I feel bad for Phil Hawes. But I think about all the other fighters like Alistair Overeem and extremely talented fighters who have the skills, but their chin just lets them down time and time and time again. And I expect that to happen here.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, Mike, people say you can put your mind and do anything, that kind of thing. And anybody can be a fighter if you want it hard enough. That's not true. Certain people are built for war, and others physically are not. I discovered that I was not when I was in college and I was taking my jiu-jitsu career rather seriously. Jacked up my shoulder in high school playing football, and I tried to stuff a takedown. Wrestling with somebody in jiu-jitsu, not competition, supposed to be flowing, having a good time, and all it took was my body weight in the wrong spot on my shoulder, and it gave out immediately. I'm not built for combat, and I think that might be what Phil Hawes is at this stage. Now, obviously, different levels. I never even stepped foot inside of a cage. I only competed on the jiu-jitsu mat, and he's at the UFC level, but I think he's too fragile for this sport. I think Phil Hawes is more skilled everywhere. I think he's a more talented athlete. He just does not have the ability to let his opponent get even one good one in. He's got to have, it's like Mortal Kombat, man. He's got to have flawless victory to be able to win a fight at the UFC level. If he doesn't, he's in trouble. And that makes him really, really hard to bet on. The problem I'm facing is number one, I love fading Phil Hawes. I've always tried to be on the other side of him, and so far that's been doing very, very well. Number two, I favor him. That's the problem for me. because he is better everywhere the sport has to offer. I don't like seeing the plus money next to Phil Hawes. Yes, Brunno is a KO machine. That's what he does. But I've got a hard time laying chalk on him, hoping for a knockout, because I don't see a single area of the game where he's actually better than Mr. Phil Hawes is. The one thing I want to point to here is Phil Hawes actually averages 2.28 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 36% accuracy, Mike, which actually is really not that bad. He's got a solid wrestling base from his college days before he made it to the UFC. Now he's really rounded out his striking game, and that's what he seems to enjoy. But his opponent here is extremely untested on the ground, and we've seen him back on his regional days. He got stuck on his back. He's a bit of a turtle. He doesn't know what to do when he's on bottom. It reminds me of the guys in the gym, Mike. I'm a bigger guy. I'm about 6 foot. And whenever I was training jiu-jitsu, I made it a point. I made a conscious effort to roll to my back and play from bottom, because big guys, they talked about Frank Mir back in the day. No one knew what to do with that guy because big guys were not submission threats off their back. They always want to be the bully. They always want to get on top. They only know being bigger and stronger and overpowering their opponents. They don't know what to do once they're in the opposite position. I made it a point to be good from my back. And that actually worked really well for me on, just the blue belt level grappling when I was younger. I don't think he's done that. From what I've seen on tape, it seems like he's the bully type. I think if Phil puts this man on his back, Ferreira won't have any idea what to do. And I think that's a very realistic path to victory and a good way to avoid getting punched in the chin. I very much lean Phil Hawes here at the plus money, simply because the line is backwards and because I think he's got an exceptional edge in the grappling department. I don't know if he's smart enough to take that path, but if he is, I think he could look minus 500 in this fight by just mauling this man on the mat.
The path is there. You wonder why Gregory Rodriguez wasn't able to do that.
Did he even try?
Well,
I remember Brunno shot a takedown. Gregory did not, I don't believe.
Yeah, but Gregory Rodriguez, you never know what he's going to do out there.
Exactly.
He could, honestly, I believe that guy, and in my heart, I believe that he could make a run for a title at this stage if his chin held up too. He's a wild man out there. He really is. But in this fight, I think somebody in the chat actually mentioned fight to end by KO is a lock, and he has it in a parlay. That was Mr. Dell, and I tend to agree with him that I don't see Hawes grinding him out here. Now the Imavov fight, how long ago was that? That was a few years ago, right?
It was a few years ago, but that was the one that caught me off guard.
Yeah, it did. And Hawes's cardio caught me off guard there. He ended up he made it the distance, right? He barely crossed the finish line, but it showed you that he could go 15 minutes. But at this stage, after the Curtis KO and then the most recent Ikram KO, I don't trust him, man. I think he was in the corner of one of the Paul brothers at one point during their boxing match. I saw him in there. So I'm not sure what he's doing, but I want to see these guys on the scales too. And you look at the fight doesn't go the distance line. I'm sure it's absurdly lined. Oh man, but the fight to end by KO, that's something I'll take a look at. I want to see what that number is.
Okay. And now I hate to be that guy, but I'm gonna. So I did go back, Mike, and Gregory Rodriguez, in fact, did not shoot a takedown in that fight. And I think the reason it went the way it did is because he was having so much success. He didn't feel any fear. He was winning that fight very cleanly right up until he got banked right on the button and knocked out cold. So he defended 2 takedowns, never looked to go to the ground himself because he was so comfortable, a little too comfortable apparently, on the feet with Mr. Ferreira. So he has not been tested grappling here at this level. And you mention the fight with Phil Hawes and Nasruddin Imavov, and I had a pile of money on Mr. Imavov because I was one of the people pounding my chest and saying that Phil Hawes would gas, Phil Hawes would tire. And that was kind of my angle in that fight, is that he would get worked by someone like Imavov and eventually collapse. He landed 4 takedowns in that fight on 7 attempts. And he absolutely was able to grind on Nasruddin Imavov. He also outlanded him in total strikes, 101 to 87 in that fight. The significant strikes are tipped in the favor of Imavov, but Phil Hawes had much, much higher activity. And that's the kind of performance I'd be looking for in this fight, man. He might still end up finding his way to a knockout because bullies tend to collapse when they don't have the fight going their way. So if he does implement some kind of a grappling game plan, there's no saying he won't still find a way to finish it. But I also would not be surprised after getting knocked out in 3 of his last 4 losses if Phil Hawes is looking to just make sure that chin stays safe and secure. And call me crazy, man, Phil Hawes by decision is 8-1. And I don't think that's all that crazy.
Okay. Well, I hope you cash your tickets, Clint, because you might be sweating that decision ticket. But hey, stranger things have happened. And that's one thing. I mean, Gaethje versus Chandler went to decision. Johnny Walker versus Thiago Santos went to decision. Johnny Walker versus Nikita Krylov went to decision. I mean, these things do happen. So you gotta, I believe it. You could cash that ticket, man.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm betting it just yet, but it's got my eye. I'll tell you that much, Mike. I'm probably going to end up plugging my nose and throwing a dart at Phil Hawes. I mentioned a couple times when I talked about like my previous records and stuff, my worst year ever betting, Mike, it all started with way too big a bet on Trevin Giles, a guy that I look to fade at every opportunity. I put a 3-unit bet on him to win a fight, and that was the first card of the year, and it set the tone. I went downhill from there. I've learned my lesson. I have bet against Phil Hawes at every opportunity possible. He's not a guy I want to bet on, but I might this weekend. I'm not going to be betting 3 units on it, Mike. It will be a bankroll managed 1-unit play on Mr. Phil Hawes if I decide to go ahead and take that route, and then maybe a little sprinkle on that decision prop. I'm not going insane. I've learned my lesson, and we will not be starting this year off the same way we did in 2023.
Gotcha.
Next fight. This is the one, Mike. I told you backstage before we got going, this is maybe the fight I am most excited for on this card. Ricky Simón takes on Mario Bautista. And the way I described it was, I think this is a battle of the dark horses. Ricky Simón has been the dark horse of this weight class for a long time. Mario Bautista has yet to be proven at this level. He's fought some decent competition, but he's still got a ways to go to prove that he belongs. But from everything we've seen, he could be a contender if he continues on the trajectory that he has had so far. Bautista has fought guys like Damon Blackshear, Guido Canetti, Benito Lopez, Brian Boom Kelleher, friend of the show. Shout out, Brian. Jay Perrin. I mean, the competition level has been soft. Now it's put up or shut up time, Mike. Mario Bautista has got to take that plunge into the deep end if he ever wants to get anywhere in his career. He's another MMA lab guy. They're all over this card. So he's got training partners that'll be in the house with him and ready to go, peaking, pushing each other at the same time. It's usually a thing that you like to see. I think he's going to be well prepared here for this fight at 13-2, but it's a big step up in competition. Ricky Simón, 20-4, more experienced, and he's been facing the who's who that this weight class has to offer. Jack Shore, Rafael Assunção. He also fought Brian Kelleher, but most recently, Song Yadong. Now, the Song Yadong fight did not go so well for Ricky Simón. I actually had a massive bet on Song Yadong. It was one of the best bets I think I've ever placed on Song Yadong the night that they fought. And it's interesting how these things go, Mike, because I was called crazy for putting a large sum of money on Song Yadong at plus money against Ricky Simón. Everyone and their mother was just pounding the Ricky Simón drum that night. He was going to be the one to expose Song Yadong. And now that he pieced Simón up, put on a show for 25 minutes, knocked him out in the 5th round, could not get a more perfect performance, all of a sudden Ricky Simón sucks. All of a sudden Ricky Simón's a bum. All of a sudden Ricky Simón's going to get dusted in his next fight. Like, the swings in MMA are crazy, man. I've got a hard time with it. We're in the small cage. Ricky Simón has proven to be an exceptional grappler. 5.84 takedowns per 15-minute fight, which is an astounding number, and it gets better. 50% accuracy, Mike. He hits half of his takedowns, shooting damn near 6 of them per 15 minutes. You don't get people that grapple as heavily as Ricky Simón does very often these days. Mario Bautista is going to have a striking advantage in this fight at range. He's far cleaner. He's much crisper. If he stays on the outside, he's going to have the advantage. But what he has is a 56% takedown defense, Mike. He's a guy who's got a slick grappling game. He's got good back takes, very opportunistic, but he jumps gilly. He looks for those chokes. He will play from his back and then work to try to sweep and submit you from that position. That is not working against Ricky Simón, my friend. Unless he catches Ricky on the feet and hurts him early, I think this fight is massively tilted to Ricky Simón. I think the relentless pressure, the small cage, the lack of distance, I think Ricky suffocates Mario Bautista. And with the fact that Bautista, instead of focusing on defending those takedowns, is willing to go to his back, that just plays so much into the hands of Ricky Simón. You wouldn't believe it. Outside of, you know, the miraculous bink that Uriah Faber landed on him way back in the day. What was it? 2020, I think, 2019, when Uriah Faber caught him. Ricky Simón has been damn near perfect since then. And it took 5 rounds of Song Yadong to catch him and put him out. I think we can maybe put to rest the concept that he's chinny after that kind of a performance. So I think Ricky grinds on his opponent here on Saturday and gets the win. I already locked up a bet at -165. Ricky is sitting about -175 at this point. I feel pretty good. It's not a huge move, but you always love to see having the best of the number, and we'll see what happens on Saturday, man. Who do you like here? What are you doing?
Imagine what Ricky Simón would do to Benito Lopez or Guido Canetti, right? They would get smashed. And I commend Mario Bautista's manager. He's done an incredible job setting this guy up for some great fights. Granted, he did have to take on Corey Sandhagen early in his career, which he had a brief moment of success and put Sandhagen in some trouble for a few seconds. But if there is one fighter who you'd like to watch fight, the fight against Ray Borg really, I drew a lot of support for Ricky Simón during that matchup. That was one of my favorite fights, to be honest. And you saw them throw down in the 3rd round. By the way, what the hell happened to Ray Borg? He had so much promise, so much talent. And he still does, but just can't get his weight.
Don't get me started, Mike. Ray Borg was my guy. I printed money every time that guy fought, except when he fought Ricky.
Yeah, what a guy. And I believe I cashed on Ricky in that spot too. Now, I was at Ricky's fight when he disposed of Jack Shore, and I was very impressed with that performance also. It showed me that he had the finishing ability too. He's not just landing these takedowns. There's something to go along with it too. He's actually posing a threat on the mat. And here against Bautista, I could see Bautista, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th takedown that lands, eventually the confidence tends to just fall off of Mario Bautista, and he kind of runs out of gas and he's demoralized down the stretch. I could see that happening, but I do wonder if that Song Yadong, I mean, that was a lot of punishment that he had to endure towards the end of that fight. I wonder how much that took out of him, but he's a gamer. I'm leaning towards the Ricky Simón side. I'll be picking him to win, but Bautista, he's live, man. And he seems to be getting better most times out. Now, we talked recency bias before starting the stream. And I remember everybody thought that Mario Bautista sucked after his controversial win over Damon Blackshear. So I believe the jury's still out on this kid. I think that his career trajectory, if you give him the right opponents, he's going to get better and better. But I think Ricky Simón at this stage in his career might be too tall of a task, to be honest. So I'm leaning towards Simón, and you bring up a great point, Clint, that this is in the smaller octagon too. So it's going to be mat return after mat return after mat return. And I think that's going to be a difference maker down the stretch. So give me Ricky Simón.
I like it, Mike. I like that we line up on this. I like that we're on the same page. We think exactly the same way here on this fight. By no means will this be the end of Mario Bautista. I'm sure he's going to, come back around, have some more spectacular moments in the octagon. But I just think this will be a little bit of a cut too soon. I do think that he will just maybe not be able to handle the relentless pace and pressure of Ricky Simón. I'm so upset. Man. You mentioned the Taz Mexican Devil. I really thought he was going to be able to harness that potential. And that moment when he fought Ricky Simón, that fight was a banger, man. And they didn't even grapple all that much. There was some scrambles, but there was a lot of punchy kicky going on in that fight too. And that was short notice up a weight class for him. They made him move up because of all the weight misses. And the fact that he was able to fight like that with a guy like Ricky Simón, who's got unparalleled pace and pressure at that weight class, God, imagine if he could have worked out those weight issues and stay. He was a champion. He was championship caliber, a weight class down where he belonged. If he could just figure out the dang weight cut, I'm so sad that his career had to go the way that it did. That's unfortunate.
I echo your sentiment completely.
Yeah. Anyway, no use crying over spilled milk, Mike. Next up, we've got Jim Miller coming back to the octagon, taking on Gabriel Benítez. This is a fun fight, man. And not only do we have Jim Miller coming back here for this one, but he's already announced that he's planning on fighting at UFC 300. This man has fought at UFC 100, UFC 200, and he will be fighting at UFC 300, assuming he's medically cleared to do so. We'll see how that goes on Saturday. But the big piece of the puzzle here for me, Mike, the big piece of the pie is that Jim Miller has announced he is not retiring after UFC 300. And that's a massive deal for me. So for me, as soon as a fighter mentions the R word and you hear that just in the back of their minds, they're thinking about the end of the road, the end of the line. That's them getting near phoning it in. That's the point in time where you know they're not going to be training quite as hard. That little extra bit of quit will be there because they know they're almost done. They just don't quite have it the way they used to. It's a mental thing. So for Jim Miller to no longer be eyeing retirement, but to be eyeing future glory, I think is kind of a boost in being able to back him with your money. Because mentality in this game is everything. Now, A10 Miller is as dangerous as anybody at the ripe old age of 40 in the first round. That's always really been his thing. He's got so many early finishes, but we do have to acknowledge the UFC has absolutely given him a break when it comes to his level of competition. Jesse Butler, Donald Cerrone, a retirement age, similar opponent, Nikolas Motta, who we've already touched on, the Ghost Pepper Eric Gonzalez. These are not guys that are overly competitive. The one actual young gun type fighter that he fought that's got potential to hang around the UFC was Alexander Hernandez, and that was a fight that did not go his way. Hernandez has been shown to be a guy who can't crack the top of the weight class, but when he fought Jim Miller, he was able to go ahead and get that one done. Little concerning. If Jim Miller is fighting legitimate competition, I'm not sure if he's capable of keeping up the insane finishing streak that he has been. He's still got fast hands. He's still got that old man strength, and he's a high-level BJJ black belt. Very opportunistic submission game. One of the tightest squeezes we've ever seen. If he gets your neck, there's not many people that I would say should jump Gilly, Mike. It doesn't work for a lot of people. Even guys like Dustin Poirier, the cream of the crop, it doesn't work for him. It's his favorite move, and he doesn't finish people with it sometimes. So it's rare that you see me advocating for it. Jim Miller, he can jump the guillotine anytime he wants, man. He can finish anybody from that position. Now, Gabriel Mowgli Benítez, 23-10. I really don't know what we're doing with this guy at this point, man. He was supposed to be a big deal. They talk about how he's the hardest kicker in the room. You'll hear that on repeat. Everybody wants to tell the story about how hard he kicks. But in his last 6 fights, he's 2-4. And his only wins are coming over Justin James, who didn't belong here in the first place as much as I liked the guy, and Charlie Ontiveros, who's chinny as all hell and doesn't belong here as much as I like the guy. His losses, David Onama, Billy Q, Omar Morales, Sadiq Youssef. not the highest level of competition in some of those spots either. Yes, some contenders, some up and coming guys, some guys we're excited about, definitely some finishing offensive output, but not title contenders, not champions, you know? So I don't think much of Mowgli Benitez at this point, Mike. I'll be honest with you. I think he's been figured out. If he doesn't get you early, the deeper the fight goes, it seems like they're able to get his timing, they're able to get his distance, and then they find the KO kill shot on him. You know, the way David Onama put him down, we talked about life-changing finishes before. The David Onama knockout feels like it might have been a life-changing finish. I mean, he collapsed on a pile back on his own leg, like went completely limp. That was filthy. I don't think Jim Miller at this stage of his life hits as hard as David Onama does. But if Mowgli's going to come out here and try and attack the leg and crash the pocket and drop his hands, wing and hooks the way he does at the body, I think Jim is going to be there for that right hand. I think Jim will have opportunities to land big power shots. And then as the fight goes deeper, that's where this gets really weird and interesting, because I don't think either of these guys get stronger the deeper the fight goes. Now, I know Jim's got a couple of second round finishes lately, but when he gets dragged deep, guys like Joe Selecki, Vince Pichel, that's actually where he started to struggle and had a bit of a problem. I don't think Benitez is the guy to take advantage of Jim late necessarily, but that is the game plan. That is how you beat this guy. So it's a very interesting fight, Mike. It's not one that I want to be too invested in. I will pick Jim Miller to continue his upset ways. And I do think he rides into the sunset here. He gets his fight booked at UFC 300 and punches a ticket, making history with those big shows. I think that's what happens. I'll go with Jim A10 Miller here, but I don't know that I'm going to risk backing this 40-year-old horse with my money.
One of the best points you made is that after this gets out of the first round, it should get very ugly, because they're going to be swinging and leg kicking often. And I'll be honest, Jim Miller, I was at his fight against Dustin Poirier, and he almost took Poirier out at the end of that fight. Poirier could barely walk. It was incredible. Very, very close. And Mushroom, great point there. I totally agree.
That's great.
I echo your sentiment as well.
Mushroom with the AARP fight.
It's interesting. And then you watch the Billy Q fight back for Gabriel Benítez, and you wonder, you know, what is propelling this young man? I mean, he's 35, so I'm 10 years older than him just about, so I can say this, but he, you know, he's got 10 losses on his career. What is he fighting for besides a purse? Is there a legacy? Is there pride? Is there honor? And Miller on the other side of the fight, you know, he's going to be competing at UFC 300 for the most part. He's been talking about this for like a decade now. And man, I got to say, I think that Miller gets this done, but after the first round, this is anybody's fight. I think that the potential for either fighter to fall off of a cliff is very high. And I'm not early 2024 first card of the year. There are better places for me to put my money, but I'll be picking Jim Miller, but man, I want to see Miller walk out and come out unscathed so that he can fight at UFC 300. I don't want him to suffer an injury where he's sidelined for UFC 300. So let's go, Jim Miller. Let's lock up that first round submission like Clint had mentioned. Jump guillotine. Do us a favor.
I like it. And the only thing that scares me about this one, Mike, is one of my favorite sayings when it comes to betting on MMA is there are no happy endings, my friend. There are no happy endings in this sport. There's that line. What is it? You live long enough to see yourself become the villain, something along those lines. That's kind of how it is in MMA. You're doing great right up until the point that you aren't. Nobody rides off into the sunset. Robbie freaking Lawler is the only one to do it. Masvidal just announced that he's unretiring. I think that might have something to do with USADA being out of the picture here with the UFC organization. Who knows? But that's going to be something that we have to monitor. These older fighters, they get that itch. They can't end on a win. They always get that scratch and want to come back and try again. And Jim Miller's gotten that break in competition, and he's fighting like a 22-year-old now, knocking these guys out in the first round. That feels good. That feels real good. But what happens when he gets somebody else who's competitive? What happens when he gets somebody else who's still fresh? I don't know if Mowgli Benítez is still competitive and fresh. So this one might not be the one, but I worry about Jim the longer he goes here at 40 years old, because I've got a feeling it won't be a happy ending, unfortunately, like so many others before him. Fingers crossed. I want to see him ride off into the sunset at UFC 300, but we'll see what happens. Let's go, Jim. Like the good man Mike said, jump Gilly for us. You had something you were going to say?
Oh, no, I'm just ready. I'm ready for the next fight. This is co-main event of the evening, right? This is flyweights. We got Manel Kape versus our friend Mr. Nikolas.
Yes,
I'll let you
sir.
kick it off.
Co-main event. Go ahead and hit the like button for me, everybody, one more time. We've been coming to you talking for dang near 2 hours at this point. 2 more fights left to go. Show us some love. Matheus Nicolau takes on Manel Kape, the rematch. And you know what? We've had a lot of rematches, Mike, some of them that nobody asked for. I think this one makes sense. You know, Manel Kape, when he first got brought over to the UFC, the Star Boy was one of the most sought-after prospects in MMA. He's got a huge following over in Asia. The guy is a big, big deal over there. And he came to the UFC with every intention of holding gold. That was the idea. He was supposed to come over here, shake things up, be an instant contender. And then he dropped a split decision in his very first fight against none other than Matheus Nicolau. Now, I've got a weird relationship with Nicolau because I will admit to how talented and how skilled this man is. I do not think he's a pushover. I do not think he's a walkover. He's absolutely a contender caliber MMA fighter who's gotten better with age, and he's only 31. So, Mike, he's still definitely in his prime, could still make a run, but he's another one of these fighters, like we've talked about, that has one big issue, and it's that chin. He's got 3 professional losses, all 3 by KO. I made a big bet on not Matheus Nicolau, on Manel Kape in his UFC debut against this man. Now, I had kind of a love-hate relationship with Kape because I bought in on Kape immediately when they brought him over. And he's an underdog to Nicolau in that first fight. I made a big bet. He drops a split decision, which, by the way, if you check MMA decisions, you'll see that everyone and their mother scored it for Manel Kape. One of the weirdest decisions going the wrong way I think you'll ever see. He should have won that fight. He should have gotten his hand raised. He won that fight. And then he followed it up with a second loss. So I'm thinking, you know what? He dropped a split decision. Boo-hoo. It is what it is. No big deal. And I apologize. I'm getting out of order here. It was Pantoja that he fought first, not Nicolau. So let me correct that. I'm so sorry. But same exact situation. I thought, boo-hoo, let me get my money back. And I made a bigger bet on Manel Kape in the second fight. And that's when he fought Matheus Nicolau. And that's when he lost the split decision. So he started 0-2 in the UFC. And I lost back-to-back bets on him. Now, you guys know I just dropped the bet on Brandon Royval. I've been betting against Pantoja the whole way. Probably something I should stop doing, but I don't learn my lessons. So I was immediately in the hole trying to back Manel Kape, and it didn't feel great. And then he immediately reminded us who he is. Knocks out Ode Osborne and Zalgaz Zumagulov, huge break in competition level, but it really allowed him to get right. Now he's training at Extreme Couture with one of the best damn coaches in the world, and another guy I feel like fits the prototype of that camp, someone who they can do really well with. He's extremely creative with his striking. He's very explosive, flying knees. He hits really hard, and he's got a really sneaky, underrated grappling game, Mike. Very opportunistic with his submissions. The knock on Manel Kape is that every once in a while, he can play with his food a little too much. He can have someone dead to rights and not go for the jugular, and he can let fights slip away. And I think that's how he lost the split against Nicolau in the first place. So as much as I don't want to disparage Nicolau in any way, I think this is a smash spot for Kape. I think they're making this fight so that he can wipe the slate clean. With Pantoja being the guy holding the belt, there's a beautiful storyline being built right now that he will avenge the loss to Matheus Nicolau, and then the only other loss he would need to avenge would be to that of the champion in Pantoja. Now, I have that 14-1 for Manel Kape to be the champion futures ticket in my pocket. So obviously, I think he's winning this fight, Mike, and I do think he's got a very clear path to the title if he gets by this one. And he is the anchor of my parlay. I parlayed Manel Kape up with Waldo Cortes-Acosta, and I've got, I believe, 3.3 units to win 2 on that play. I might have actually, I think the odds were better than that. I think I've got my numbers wrong. At any rate, it's a 2-unit bet. And I really like Manel Kape in this spot, Mike. I don't think he takes his opponent lightly here this time, and I think he probably looks for the finish a bit more aggressively. What do you think of this matchup?
Interesting. Well, Felipe dos Santos gave Manel Kape a little bit of a run for his money, and he just would not go away. How talented is that kid in his last fight? Taking, I believe that might have been a short notice replacement fight. And then you had the Kai Kara France matchup that was hanging out there, and you have the Alex Perez matchup that should have. I was playing Manel Kape rather heavily against Alex Perez, and here, in a rematch where the first fight, I also was on Manel Kape. I actually went back and looked at the number. I had Manel Kape at -115, the first iteration of this matchup. And the way the fight ended, you saw one of the greatest strengths of Matthias Nicolau is that he can skirt along the outside of the cage, have an opponent try to close distance, and then he will take advantage of that and counter strike. And he does that time and time again against Matt Schnell and others. And he can walk away victorious. The challenge here is that Manel Kape is the quicker fighter, and he has a high compete level. And he gets angry when he fights, but he seems to have channeled that in a positive manner. So I also like Manel Kape here. I also saw that the number for Manel Kape was hovering around the -170s, then the -190s, then the -200s, then the -225s. Now we're already out to like -260 or so. So maybe that number has gotten away from us. Maybe it hasn't, but I like Manel Kape here. And I also like his career trajectory as well. I think that he has a very high ceiling and that he has some untapped potential as well. I think that he is a championship caliber fighter. And if you watch him fight against Alexandre Pantoja, I mean, you talk about the cleanliness of striking. Manel Kape is one of the cleanest strikers you'll see, and he is fighting out of a solid camp. His the body type that he's had has changed a bit, and I think that is partially due to him dedicating himself to the training. And I think that he is not only my pick here, but I think that he is championship material. It's just I don't want to talk about Manel Kape and then not talk about Nicolau, because Nicolau is a solid fighter. I believe he's 19-3-1 or something like that. Am I correct there? Let me see. 19-3-1 without looking at the paper. And Manel Kape, he is a competitor. The only way he loses is when his body gives out on him. And Manel Kape was a tepid striker initially. He learned from those losses, though, which is key here. And some folks don't learn from their losses. So in this spot, I think that Nicolau, you watch the Royval fight, he was knocked out. You watch the Dustin Ortiz fight from, I believe that was, when was that? A few years ago, 2018 or so. And that was an issue here. So I have some concerns for Nicolau's chin. I think that folks who are playing Manel Kape via KO, that might be the play. But we know, as you mentioned, Manel Kape does have a tendency to play with his food. So I think that the smarter play is the money line, to be honest. So I'm going to be picking Manel Kape here. Very talented flyweight. Looking forward to him performing inside of the octagon on Saturday night. Okay.
I like it. I'm glad you touched on his opponent, because like I mentioned, I do not mean to be disrespectful. And actually, our guy James from Lucrative MMA Bets, he put a thing out on Twitter a couple weeks ago over the gap break. Everybody was very active on social media when we didn't have any fights going on. And he asked, what is a weakness of yours as a gambler? And my response was, I sometimes have a tendency to become enamored with the strengths of the fighter that I see winning the fight, and I gloss over their weaknesses, or I gloss over the strengths of their opponent. And I appreciate you, Mike, because that's exactly what I did here. I am so sold on the Kape side of things, and I've got history with this fighter, and I've been plotting this revenge moment for months. And it's finally here, so I didn't give Matheus Nicolau due justice. So I appreciate you touching base on him, and we absolutely cannot look past this man. But at the end of the day, I do still think that Kopp is the better quality fighter, and I do think he's going to go ahead and get the win here. So definitely something I'll work on and try to give you guys the other side of the coin, even though I'm not betting that side of the coin for these breakdowns. But it is main event time nonetheless, everybody. We have the rematch, another rematch. This one absolutely necessary. Magomed Ankalaev takes on Johnny Walker. And the reason that we need this one, Mike, is because the last fight ended so strangely. Now, I mentioned my weakness for not giving fighters their due credit. I mentioned, liking somebody, becoming enamored and glossing over their opponents, and that's not what's going to happen here, Mike. I'm a hater. I do not like Magomed Ankalaev. I will not give him his flowers, and I've chosen to do so very specifically. And so I brought in a Magomed Ankalaev expert to make sure that the people listening will get that side of the coin, because basically I think this guy is a meme machine. I do think he's just one half step away from being a fraud in the UFC. And because of that, I want somebody else who maybe views him in a little bit better light to share with the people what I might be missing. But Magomed Ankalaev has this very shiny 18-1-1 record, but that one loss is a meme submission with 1 second left on the clock to Paul Craig. Now, you might not want to hold that against him. You can say that, oh, Paul Craig submits everybody, but man, with 1 second on the clock, you shouldn't be tapping to anything. You should let yourself go unconscious and wake up having won the fight, because they will separate you. I know you're not looking at the clock, and in that moment, you're just thinking, oh my God, I can't breathe. But if you had any awareness whatsoever of how the fight was taking place, you just kind of chill out in that moment and wait and see what happens. The tap is concerning to me, especially because we're not talking about like an arm bar where your arm is going to be broken and you'll be out of commission for 9 months or something along those lines. It's a blood choke. Like, you'll be fine. They'll wake you up. He's fought an extremely low level of competition, in my opinion, since. Marcin Prachniow, chinniest guy in the UFC. Dalcha Lungiambula, old, small, doesn't belong in this weight class, also gave him a run for his money. Ion Cutelaba, low IQ, ended up changing weight classes, I think, after that one. Klitzen Abreu, who's now over in the PFL and way overweight. It's been a bit of a rough road for Magomed Ankalaev. He's more kicker than he is Nurmagomedov. He doesn't wrestle with the same vengeance that some of these Russian monster type dudes do. And then he did return the favor with the meme knockout of Anthony Smith with like the leg kick TKOs and, had him crippled basically from the go. But the decisions against Thiago Santos and Volkan Oezdemir don't overly impress me. The split decision against Jan, that might have been a bad scorecard, Mike. I'll tip my hat and say that was probably a bad judge's scorecard. But the fact that it was close enough for anybody to even think that it was a draw, that's a black mark on your record, in my opinion. And then he follows the draw up with a no contest to Johnny Walker because he threw a blatantly illegal knee to the guy's face. Another issue I have with that fight is if you go back and watch the Johnny Walker fight, Johnny was having extreme success with the inside leg kicks. And it seemed like it was really starting to bother Magomed Ankalaev. He's generally the one who's beating up his opponent's legs. And he looked like he was very uncomfortable with the offense that Johnny Walker was getting off on him in that spot. And the only reason he got the fight to a dominant position, the only reason he got the takedown is because Johnny did something Johnny Walker-esque. The man's a walking meme, Mike. You can't trust him. He fakes a liver shot, grabs his ribs like something's wrong, and then throws a flying knee. And he was this close, Mike. He was this close. That flying knee almost caught Magomed Ankalaev, and boy, would have lost my mind if that had happened. But that provided the opportunity for Ankalaev to get him up against the fence. Now, we're in a cage clinch grappling situation, and Johnny was able to keep his wits about him and really did a good job of working his way up to the feet. He's got a much larger frame, and even though Johnny has some chin concerns, his style recently has been very effective at protecting that chin weakness. And Magomed Ankalaev was having a really hard time closing the distance. If you touch Johnny Walker on the chin, we saw what Jamal Hill did to him. He literally like loses control of his body and flails wildly when that happens.
True.
But Magomed wasn't able to get there to touch him. I am very tempted to actually throw a bet on Johnny Walker in this rematch. The first time they fought, this line was shorter, Mike. I believe Magomed Ankalaev was a minus 350, somewhere in that ballpark. He's now minus 500. And I'm trying to figure out why. Because based on what we saw, I feel like Johnny was winning the fight for the most part, and it was his own mistake in doing something very weird that allowed Magomed to get a dominant position. But once he got that dominant position, he didn't do a whole lot with it. And Walker was working his way back up to his feet when the illegal knee happened. So any damage would have come from the illegal strike. Nothing that he did dominantly. I think Johnny proved that he's capable of physically matching this man. And on the feet, that height and reach may be a significant advantage for him. So with this inflated number, plus 375 on Johnny Walker, I'm very tempted. Talk to me about your boy, Mike. Let me know what the move is here on Magomed Ankalaev.
Are you ready? You're not wrong, Clint. You're not wrong, and I come in peace, Clint. I come in peace, right? And I want to make you aware that Magomed Ankalaev is currently riding a 9-fight winning streak. Let that sink in for you. It is true. Yes, he has a draw and I believe a no contest in there, but that's a 9-fight winning streak. And man, yes, that knee by Johnny Walker was within a few centimeters of landing and could have derailed Magomed Ankalaev's championship run. But I will say that this is a high risk, low reward spot for Magomed Ankalaev. That is as clear as day. And I think, honestly, that there is value on Johnny Walker at this spot. I would, at this line, yes, I think Johnny Walker is value here. But do I think that Magomed Ankalaev is the most talented fighter at 205 pounds on planet Earth? I have strong conviction that he is. The problem is in here, sometimes he makes some poor decisions. And you're right. He could have potentially hung on an extra second and walked away victorious rather than tap to that triangle choke. But hey, when that's locked in, right, what do you do? So you watch Magomed Ankalaev compete, and I go back to also Sean Strickland, the middleweight champion, him talking about whenever Magomed Ankalaev would come in to spar, he would always make a scene saying, "Oh my goodness gracious, here is Magomed Ankalaev." He always had challenges whenever he faced him. And you watch the style of his fights. I will say that Thiago Santos, you want to see a gun-shy fighter, watch Magomed Ankalaev versus Thiago Santos. He gets clipped once, and then he is playing, I don't want to even say possum, but he's not the same fighter. He's not the aggressive fighter that we saw. The Nikita Krylov matchup also, that was a situation where he was put in a spot where he had to face some adversity and overcome it. Granted, he can, and he does have the skill set to do so. Can I bank on it most of the time? No. And I'm not going to go out of my way to make a minus 400 or minus 500 unit, minus 500 betting line play, money line play on Magomed Ankalaev. I think that you made a lot of great points. And as a Magomed Ankalaev truther, it pains me to say this is a high risk, low reward matchup for my friend Magomed Ankalaev. But I also go back to the Iwan Kudalaba matchup, and you watch the first fight, and you looked at Iwan Kudalaba playing possum for a few seconds, right? And the referee called it while he was leaning against the fence and pretending as he was getting hit. And then the second time they fought, Ankalaev came out like a gangbuster and he just floored Iwan Kudalaba. And I could see that happening here. And he mentioned that prior to the first Johnny Walker fight, that he's not playing around anymore. And maybe part of that was throwing that illegal strike. I don't know what was in his head, but it was not a smart decision, and I don't support him in that endeavor. But I will say that Magomed Ankalaev has the tools to defeat Johnny Walker, and you watch the regional tape, watch the Jamal Hill fight. There are many fights where Johnny Walker. Watch the Corey Anderson fight. This guy can get put on giraffe legs at any second, and it happens like that. Ryan Spann had him in trouble too. So I don't want to degrade Johnny Walker's athletic ability, because he has that, and he could land one strike that could knock out any 205 pounders. Hell, I think he could knock out any heavyweight if he lands that knee up the middle. But I will say that if you're asking implied probability, I think that odds are that Magomed Ankalaev wins this fight. Am I touching this fight from a betting perspective, Clint? No, I'm not. But I understand, and I think that I honestly think you should make a play on Johnny Walker. I'm going to come out and say it. I think that there's value on Johnny Walker here. Am I going to do it? No, simply because I believe in Magomed Ankalaev's abilities, but I also have seen the bonehead decisions that he's willing to make inside of the octagon. And that's a cause for concern. I have to be real here. So I hope my honest assessment does it justice. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Mike. I really do. And I think the people listening do as well. I think we're right on the right track here. And I'm glad you mentioned Ankalaev's comments about the last fight, because when it comes to totals specifically, not necessarily money lines, but the totals for fights, I love to zig when they zag. The first fight looked like it was a dead nuts over. These guys were playing the range game. They were playing kicky shin. They were kicking each other's feet under the table. It was going to be a very slow, methodical type of fight. And it seems like there's a lot more emotion in this one. You brought up the Ion Cutelaba fight, and Magomed Ankalaev came out with some venom and some heat in his punches after that first fight. This is a very similar situation where the fight got called early. He feels like he's been wronged, and I do think he'll start faster yet again. Same thing with Johnny Walker. Walker has made mention multiple times in different social media posts and accounts that he takes offense to what happened, and he's very upset. If you remember, he was with these illegal shots, they want their opponent to lose a point, right? Like, that's part of the game. You want to make sure your opponent gets punished for their strike. So he was maybe playing it up just a little bit after he got hit, because he obviously wasn't wobbled, he wasn't rocked, he wasn't hurt, but he wanted him to lose a point. So he played the game.
He was in the desert.
He was in the desert. The official, the ringside doctor, who in this case was the one who had previously told a fighter that got kicked egregiously in the balls that it wasn't a nut shot, and tried to make him continue the fight and disqualified him. Terrible doctor. But they're out in Abu Dhabi, and Johnny Walker is Brazilian and doesn't have any idea where he is. The doctor asked him, "Where are you?" And his response was, "I'm in the desert." And the doctor thought he was concussed enough with that response to waive the fight off. So horrific stoppage and situation. Johnny was fine, and the ref robbed us of how that fight might have played out after that point. So I think both these guys are going to come out with a little bit more intent. I don't like the 1.5, Mike, but if I could find an alternate 2.5 that's at a decent price tag, I might play an under 2.5 on this fight. I think these guys are going to come out and look to make a statement, and instead of dragging this fight deep, probably try to get it over with relatively quickly. I think there's going to be some more emotion, some more bad blood, and that could lend us to violence. That might be the way I look, more so than picking a side, because I am with you. Magomed deserves to be the favorite. I think the line is too wide there. Does that mean Johnny Walker wins? Not necessarily, but I think someone's getting finished.
I concur.
I like it. All right, everybody. That is UFC Vegas 84. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us tonight, especially with the Natty going on. I know you guys are all sweating your college football bets out there, so thank you for spending time with us. Welcome back. We are pleased to have you. To remind you of the schedule, of course, on Thursday, we will have the Total Takedown, where we go over overs and unders. On Friday, we will have the Undefeated Post-Weigh-In Show, where we make the best reads of the week. And then on Saturday, Pub Sports Radio, right here, live every single week for a Fight Companion bet stream with the boys. So make sure you're tuning in. I hope you all start the year off strong. Fill those pockets immediately. Let's keep the good times rolling. Let's roll 2023 straight on in to 2024 and have one hell of a year, Mike. Is there anything you would like to say on your way out, my friend? The floor is yours. Let the people know where they can find you, how they can support you, and how they can ingest your content.
Thanks, Clint. If you'd like to, feel free to go to my YouTube channel. I've been really putting a lot of time and effort into putting out value-based videos with nuggets of information at Mike's MMA Picks on YouTube. That would be a big help. And also just, I appreciate the positivity that you bring to the table on a daily basis, Clint. Thank you for all that you do for the community. And, go get what's yours one fight at a time. And let's get off to a great start in 2024. So let's do this, my brothers. Thank you for the time. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We're going to clean house this year, and I appreciate you and the positivity as well, Mike. Not many people can match my cheery outlook and disposition. You're one of the few who can. So, we'll get along just great. Everybody, kick some ass this week. Start your year off right. I don't do the New Year's resolution thing. I make goals. If you do the New Year's resolution, I hope your butt's in the gym. I hope you stick to it. I hope you smash it. Set realistic goals for yourself so you can make sure you can achieve them. Have a wonderful year. And we're going to start off on the right foot here with MMA 2024. Let's roll.